My name is Beverly, and I'm 32 years old. I've always lived in the shadow of my younger sister Marlene, the family's golden child, who could do no wrong. When my parents used my wedding fund to pay for her lavish ceremony, I thought that was the worst betrayal possible. But I discovered something about Marlene's perfect groom that would change everything. At her wedding, while I sat by the kitchen with my name misspelled, I stood up and let a video speak the truth that shattered their fairy tale forever. Before I tell you how I exposed the truth at her wedding, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this one. Now let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up in our suburban Ohio home, I learned early that love in our family came with conditions. Marlene, 4 years younger than me, was born with what my mother called the gift. She had golden blonde hair that caught sunlight, perfectly bright blue eyes that sparkled when she smiled, and a natural charm that made adults melt. I, on the other hand, had mousy brown hair average features and a quiet personality that never commanded attention. The favoritism started small but grew more obvious each year. When back-to-school shopping came around, Marlene got brand new outfits from the nice department stores, while I wore her hand-me-downs from the previous year, even though they were often too small or completely different in style. My parents justified this by saying Marlene was still growing and needed clothes that fit properly while I could make do with what we had. During elementary school, when I brought home straight A's on my report card, my parents would nod approvingly and say, "Good job," before moving on to discuss Marlene's latest art project or dance recital. But when Marlene brought home B's and C's, they celebrated like she'd won a Nobel Prize. They'd take her out for ice cream and buy her a special toy as a reward for trying her best. The academic disparity became even more pronounced in high school. I maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout all 4 years, participated in National Honor Society, and volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend. Marlene barely scraped by with a 2.5 average, spent most of her time posting selfies on social media, and skipped classes regularly. Yet, when graduation came, my parents threw Marlene a huge party for overcoming her challenges, while my achievements were mentioned briefly during dessert. College planning revealed the true depth of their favoritism. Despite my excellent grades and scholarship opportunities, my parents insisted I attend the local community college to save money and stay close to home. Meanwhile, they enthusiastically supported Marlene's application to a prestigious private university 3 states away, complete with sorority fees, a luxury apartment, and a generous monthly allowance. When I questioned this decision, my father explained that Marlene needed the full college experience to develop her potential, while I was practical and responsible enough to succeed anywhere. I worked 3 jobs during my 2 years at community college. I cleaned offices at night, tutored elementary students after school, and worked weekends at a local diner. Every dollar I earned went toward my education and future goals. Marlene, meanwhile, posted constant social media updates from exclusive restaurants, spring break trips, and shopping sprees, all funded by our parents' generous support. After completing my nursing degree and landing a position at the county hospital, I thought my parents might finally recognize my accomplishments. Instead, they focused on Marlene's new career as an Instagram influencer, praising her entrepreneurial spirit and creative vision. They helped her set up a professional photography studio in their basement and purchased expensive camera equipment to support her content creation. The wedding fund situation began 3 years ago when I started seriously dating a fellow nurse named David. We talked about marriage, and I began saving every extra penny for our future wedding. I opened a separate savings account and contributed $500 every month, working overtime shifts to reach my goal. My parents knew about my savings plan and occasionally asked about the balance, which I naively shared with them. When David and I broke up last year due to his job relocation across the country, I decided to keep the wedding fund intact for whenever I met the right person. By that time, I had accumulated $28,000 through careful budgeting and countless extra shifts at the hospital. Then Marlene announced her engagement to Marcus, and suddenly my parents' attention shifted to planning what they called the wedding of the century. They spoke about venue costs, catering expenses, and designer dress prices with an excitement I'd never seen before. When I asked how they planned to afford such an elaborate celebration, my mother casually mentioned that they'd borrowed money from my wedding fund as a temporary measure. Borrowed turned out to be a permanent transfer. My parents explained that Marlene deserved the wedding of her dreams, and I would understand when I found someone worthy of me. They promised to pay me back eventually, but their tone suggested this was more of a favor I should feel honored to provide rather than a loan they felt obligated to repay. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Not only had they taken my hard-earned savings without permission, but they'd dismissed my future happiness as less important than Marlene's immediate desires. When I expressed hurt and anger, they accused me of being selfish and unsupportive of family. According to them, a good sister would happily sacrifice for Marlene's special day. Marlene's engagement announcement came with all the fanfare of a royal proclamation. She'd met Marcus Richardson at a charity gala, where she was hired to take social media photos for the event organisers. Marcus was 35 years old, owned a successful real estate development company, and according to my parents, represented everything they'd ever wanted for their daughter. Within hours of the engagement, our family group chat exploded with wedding planning discussions. My mother immediately took charge, creating spreadsheets for vendors' timelines and budget allocations. My father researched venues and began reaching out to his business contacts for recommendations. Marlene posted a constant stream of ring photos and engagement shoot pictures, basking in the attention and congratulations from her online followers. I waited for someone to include me in the planning process. As the older sister and only sibling, I expected to be asked about bridesmaid duties, shower planning, or at least my opinion on wedding details. Instead, I watched from the sidelines as my parents and Marlene made decisions without consulting me. The venue selection process took 3 weeks and involved visits to 7 different locations. My parents and Marlene toured country clubs, hotel ballrooms, and historic estates, taking photos and comparing amenities. I learned about their choices through Marlene's social media posts and overheard phone conversations, never receiving a direct invitation to join these important visits. When they finally chose the Riverside Country Club, the most expensive option on their list, I discovered the venue cost alone was $50,000. This didn't include catering, flowers, music, or any other wedding expenses. The total budget, according to my mother's excited phone call to her sister, was approaching $150,000. Marlene's dress shopping expedition involved a trip to New York City with our mother and 3 of Marlene's closest friends. They spent an entire weekend visiting high-end bridal boutiques, staying at a luxury hotel, and dining at expensive restaurants. The dress she ultimately chose cost $20,000 and required 6 months for custom alterations. I learned about these details secondhand through social media posts and family dinner conversations, where I felt more like an observer than a participant. When I asked my mother if I could join them for the next dress fitting, she explained that the appointment was already confirmed for a specific number of people, and adding me would complicate the scheduling. The bridesmaid selection process revealed the depth of my exclusion. Marlene chose 6 women, her college roommate, 2 influencer friends, Marcus's sister, and 2 cousins from our father's side of the family. These were women she'd known for at most 5 years, while I, her sister of 32 years, wasn't even considered for the honour. When I finally gathered the courage to ask Marlene directly about being a bridesmaid, she looked genuinely surprised by my question. She explained that she'd wanted her wedding party to have a cohesive aesthetic, and that her chosen bridesmaids all shared similar heights, hair colours, and social media presence. I didn't fit the image she was trying to create for her perfect wedding photos. The bachelor and bachelorette party planning excluded me entirely. Marlene's bachelorette celebration involved a week-long trip to Napa Valley, complete with private wine tastings, spa treatments, and professional photography sessions. The cost per person was $3,000, which my parents paid for Marlene, while the other bridesmaids covered their own expenses. Marcus's bachelor party was equally extravagant, featuring a trip to Las Vegas with private gambling tables, VIP club access, and luxury suite accommodations. My parents praised Marcus's friends for organising such a memorable celebration, and even contributed money to ensure the groom had the best possible experience. Meanwhile, I received a formal wedding invitation in the mail addressed to Beverly Thompson and guest, as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than the bride's sister. The invitation indicated I was invited to the ceremony and reception, but there was no mention of rehearsal dinner family photos or any other wedding-related events. When I confronted my parents about feeling excluded from Marlene's wedding preparations, they accused me of being jealous and bitter about my sister's happiness. My mother suggested that my negative attitude was exactly why I hadn't been included in the planning process, creating a circular logic that blamed me for my own exclusion. My father added that successful families support each other without expecting recognition or rewards. He pointed out that they'd given me a good education and a stable upbringing, and now it was my turn to support Marlene's important life milestone without making everything about myself. The final blow came when I discovered that several family friends and distant relatives had been invited to the rehearsal dinner while I was specifically excluded from this intimate family gathering. When I asked about this omission, my mother explained that the rehearsal dinner was only for people who had played active roles in the wedding planning and preparation. Despite the hurt and humiliation, I decided to attend the wedding anyway. I told myself that family relationships required compromise and forgiveness, and that boycotting Marlene's wedding would only create permanent damage to our already strained bonds. I hoped that once the wedding stress was over, we could rebuild our relationship on more equal terms. My life-changing discovery happened during a late-night shift at County General Hospital 3 weeks before Marlene's wedding. I was working in the emergency department, handling the usual Friday night chaos of accident victims and minor injuries when I saw a familiar figure in the waiting area. Marcus Richardson sat in the corner, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect hair dishevelled. He was holding hands with a young woman who appeared to be in significant distress. She was crying softly, clutching her stomach and leaning against Marcus for support. What caught my attention immediately was that she was obviously pregnant, probably around 6 or 7 months along. I tried to focus on my other patients, but I couldn't ignore the scene unfolding near the registration desk. The woman, who looked to be in her mid-20s with long dark hair, was filling out paperwork while Marcus spoke quietly to her. I caught fragments of their conversation as I moved between patient rooms. "Sarah, you need to calm down," Marcus was saying in a tense whisper. "The stress isn't good for the baby." "How can I calm down when you're getting married in 3 weeks?" Sarah replied, her voice shaking with emotion. "What happens to us after that? What happens to our child?" Marcus glanced around nervously before responding. "We've talked about this. I'll handle everything. You just need to disappear for a while. Let things settle down after the wedding. I'll take care of you and the baby financially, but you can't be visible right now. My heart started racing as the implications became clear. Marcus, my sister's perfect fiancé, was having an affair with a pregnant woman. Not only was he cheating on Marlene, but he was planning to continue this relationship even after their marriage. I moved closer, pretending to organize supplies at a nearby station while listening to their conversation. Sarah was becoming more agitated, explaining that she couldn't handle the stress of hiding their relationship anymore. She'd been having contractions and was worried about the baby's health. "I've been with you for 2 years, Marcus," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. 2 years of secret dates, hidden phone calls, and promises that you'd leave her. "Now you're actually going through with this wedding, and I'm supposed to just disappear." Marcus's response chilled me to the bone. "The wedding is a business arrangement, Sarah. Marlene's father has connections I need for my company expansion. After a few years, I'll divorce her and we can be together openly. You just need to be patient." When Sarah's name was called for her examination, Marcus walked her to the door of the treatment room. I heard him tell her that he'd be waiting outside and that they'd continue their conversation later. As he returned to the waiting area, I made sure to stay out of his line of sight. My mind was spinning with shock and anger. Marcus wasn't just cheating on Marlene, he was using her for business purposes while maintaining a long-term relationship with another woman who was carrying his child. My sister was walking into a marriage based on complete deception. After my shift ended at 7 in the morning, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd witnessed. I drove home in a daze, trying to process the information and decide what to do with it. Part of me wanted to call Marlene immediately and tell her everything, but I knew she wouldn't believe me without proof. I spent the weekend conducting my own investigation. I started by searching social media for any Sarah connected to Marcus. It took several hours, but I eventually found her Instagram account under the name Sarah Mitchell. Her profile was private, but her profile picture showed the same woman I'd seen at the hospital. Through mutual connections and public posts, I discovered that Sarah worked as a marketing coordinator for a company that had done business with Marcus's real estate firm. Their professional relationship had apparently developed into something personal, and based on the timeline of her pregnancy photos, they'd been together for at least 2 years. I created a fake social media account and sent Sarah a friend request, hoping to gain access to more information. While waiting for her response, I did more research on Marcus himself. I discovered that his real estate company had been struggling financially for the past year, and several business articles mentioned his need for investors and business partnerships. Sarah accepted my friend request after a few days, and I was able to view her complete photo history. The evidence was overwhelming. There were pictures of her and Marcus together dating back 3 years, including romantic dinners, weekend trips, and intimate moments that clearly showed a serious relationship. Most damning were the recent photos showing her pregnancy progression, with Marcus's hands on her belly, and captions about their excitement for their first child together. The timestamps on these photos overlapped completely with Marcus's relationship with Marlene. I also found text message screenshots that Sarah had posted to her close friend's story, showing conversations between her and Marcus. In these messages, Marcus referred to Marlene as his business arrangement and promised Sarah that their relationship was the real thing. He discussed specific plans for supporting Sarah and their child while maintaining his marriage to Marlene for professional purposes. The final piece of evidence came when I followed Marcus discreetly after work one evening. He drove directly to Sarah's apartment complex and spent the night there, leaving early the next morning in time to meet Marlene for a wedding planning appointment. Now I had a terrible decision to make. I had concrete proof that Marcus was planning to marry my sister under false pretenses while maintaining a secret family with another woman. But I also knew that Marlene and my parents would likely blame me for trying to ruin the wedding, rather than thanking me for exposing the truth. I decided to give Marlene one chance to discover the truth herself. I anonymously sent her copies of the social media posts and screenshots, hoping she would investigate further and call off the wedding. Instead, Marlene showed the anonymous messages to our parents, who immediately accused me of orchestrating a malicious campaign against Marcus out of jealousy. When Marlene confronted me directly about the messages, I tried to explain what I'd witnessed at the hospital and encourage her to investigate Marcus's background more thoroughly. She became furious, accusing me of being unable to accept her happiness and trying to sabotage her wedding because I was bitter about my own failed relationship. "You've always been jealous of me," Marlene screamed during our confrontation. "You can't stand that I found someone successful and loving while you're alone and miserable. These fake messages and made-up stories are just desperate attempts to ruin my wedding because you can't have your own." My parents supported Marlene's version of events completely. They suggested that I seek professional help for my unhealthy obsession with destroying my sister's happiness. They threatened to exclude me from the wedding entirely if I continued spreading malicious rumours about Marcus. Faced with my family's complete rejection of the truth, I made a final decision. I would attend the wedding as planned, but I would bring the evidence with me. If Marlene wanted to ignore the warning signs, she would learn the truth in the most public way possible. The morning of Marlene's wedding dawned bright and cloudless, the kind of perfect September day that wedding planners dream about. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a simple navy blue dress that I'd bought specifically for the occasion. It wasn't designer or particularly expensive, but it was appropriate and flattering. I did my own hair and makeup, creating a polished but understated look that wouldn't draw attention away from the bride. I arrived at the Riverside Country Club 30 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The venue was absolutely stunning, with manicured gardens, sparkling fountains, and panoramic views of the river valley. White roses and gold accents decorated every surface, creating an atmosphere of luxury and elegance that perfectly matched Marlene's vision. My first indication of my status in the family hierarchy came when I approached the guest registration table. The woman checking in guests scanned her list several times before finding my name spelled incorrectly as Beverly Thompson rather than Beverly. When I pointed out the error, she apologized and made a handwritten correction, but the misspelling felt like a symbolic representation of how little thought my family had given to my presence. The seating chart revealed an even more humiliating reality. While my parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins were seated at tables near the front of the reception hall, I was assigned to table 12, positioned directly next to the kitchen service doors. My table mates included the wedding photographer's assistant, 2 servers who were taking their break, and a vendor representative who was coordinating the evening's entertainment. I watched other family members arrive in expensive cars and designer outfits, air-kissing and exclaiming over the venue's beauty. Several distant relatives who I saw maybe once a year were seated closer to the head table than I was. My parents greeted me with polite nods when our paths crossed, but they were clearly focused on more important guests and wedding logistics. The ceremony itself was undeniably beautiful. Marlene looked absolutely radiant in her $20,000 gown, which featured intricate beadwork and a train that extended 12 feet behind her. Marcus wore a custom-tailored tuxedo and looked every inch the successful businessman that my parents adored. The string quartet played classical pieces, while 150 guests watched the couple exchange vows they'd written themselves. As I listened to Marcus promise to love, honor, and cherish Marlene for the rest of his life, I thought about Sarah, sitting alone in her apartment 7 months pregnant with his child. I wondered if she was watching the ceremony through social media, seeing the man she loved pledge eternal devotion to another woman for business purposes. Marlene's vows were filled with gratitude for finding her soulmate and excitement for their future together. She spoke about trust partnership and building a life based on honesty and mutual respect. The irony was almost unbearable, knowing that every word was based on Marcus's deception. The cocktail hour following the ceremony showcased the wedding's extravagant budget. Servers circulated with champagne and gourmet appetizers, while a jazz trio played background music. Ice sculptures shaped like swans graced the bar area, and fresh flower arrangements adorned every surface. The photographer captured endless posed shots of the wedding party, immediate family, and important guests. I stood alone near the edge of the cocktail area, watching my family celebrate without me. My parents posed for pictures with Marlene and Marcus, beaming with pride and joy. Several times, photographers asked family members to gather for group shots, but I was never included in these important moments. When we moved into the reception hall for dinner, the disparity in seating became even more obvious. The head table, elevated on a platform and draped in gold fabric, seated the wedding party and immediate family. My parents sat proudly beside the bride and groom, basking in the attention and congratulations from other guests. Meanwhile, I made my way to table 12, navigating around busy servers, carrying trays of food to and from the kitchen. The noise level near the service area was significantly higher than the rest of the reception, making conversation difficult. My table mates were polite, but clearly preoccupied with their work responsibilities. The 7-course dinner was exquisite, featuring dishes that probably cost more per plate than I spent on groceries in a week. Each course was accompanied by carefully selected wines and presented with artistic flair. I tried to enjoy the food, but the combination of my awkward seating and growing anger made it difficult to appreciate the culinary experience. The toasts began during the main course, and I listened to speech after speech, praising Marcus's character and the couple's perfect love story. Marlene's maid of honor spoke about Marcus's devotion and how obviously happy he made the bride. Marcus's best man joked about his friend's bachelor days being over now that he'd found his true love. The final straw came when my father stood to give his speech. He spoke eloquently about Marlene's journey from a beautiful child to an accomplished young woman who deserved only the best that life had to offer. He praised Marcus for recognizing Marlene's worth and promising to cherish her forever. "Some people in life settle for less than they deserve," my father said, his eyes briefly meeting mine across the room. "But Marlene has always known her value and waited for a man worthy of her love. Marcus represents everything we could have hoped for in a son-in-law: success, integrity, and genuine devotion to our daughter." As applause filled the room and guests raised their glasses in celebration, I made my final decision. I had tried to warn Marlene privately, but she'd chosen to ignore the truth. My parents had made it clear that my concerns were unwelcome and that my presence was barely tolerated. If they wanted to celebrate Marcus's integrity and devotion, they would see exactly what kind of man they were praising. I excused myself from table 12 and walked purposefully toward the DJ booth at the front of the reception hall. The time for silent suffering was over. The DJ was busy organizing music for the dancing portion of the reception when I approached his booth. His name was Kevin, according to the small placard on his equipment, and he looked to be in his mid-20s with an easy smile and professional demeanor. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and confident. "I'm Beverly, the bride's sister. I have a special video tribute that I'd like to share with the guests." Kevin looked up from his playlist with interest. "Oh, that's so sweet. Family tributes are always really touching. Did you want to present it during the dessert course or wait until after the first dance?" "Actually, I think now would be perfect," I replied, pulling out my phone and the USB drive I'd prepared earlier that week. "The family is all here, everyone's feeling emotional from the toasts, and I think this will really add to the celebration." I had spent considerable time preparing the video presentation, ensuring that every piece of evidence was clear and undeniable. The compilation included screenshots of Sarah's social media posts with timestamps, photos of her and Marcus together over the past 3 years, and the hospital security footage that a sympathetic colleague had helped me obtain. I'd also included copies of the text messages between Marcus and Sarah enlarged, so they would be clearly readable on the large screens throughout the reception hall. Kevin helped me connect my USB drive to his system while I explained that the video was a surprise for the bride and groom. I could see several family members watching our interaction with curious interest, probably wondering what special surprise I had prepared for Marlene's big day. The reception hall had 4 large screens positioned around the room so that all guests could see the presentations clearly. These screens had been used throughout the evening to display childhood photos of the bride and groom, romantic engagement pictures and videos from friends who couldn't attend the wedding. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kevin announced over the microphone, "we have a special presentation from Beverly, the bride's sister." I took the microphone from Kevin, my hands surprisingly steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. The reception hall gradually quieted as guests turned their attention toward the front of the room. Marlene and Marcus looked surprised, but pleased, probably expecting a sentimental sister's tribute to their love story. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Marlene and Marcus," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Family relationships are built on love, trust, and honesty. As Marlene's sister, I've always wanted nothing but the best for her. Tonight, I want to share something with all of you that I believe you need to know about the groom." I could see confusion spreading across the faces in the crowd. My parents looked alarmed, probably sensing that my presentation wasn't going to be the traditional family tribute they expected. Marlene's smile faltered slightly as she registered the serious tone in my voice. "What I'm about to show you might be difficult to see, but I believe that truth and honesty should be the foundation of any marriage. Marcus, I think it's time for everyone to meet Sarah." I nodded to Kevin, who started the video presentation. The first image that appeared on all 4 screens was a recent photo of Marcus and Sarah together, her pregnant belly clearly visible as they posed in what was obviously her apartment. The timestamp in the corner showed the photo was taken just 2 weeks ago. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Gasps echoed throughout the reception hall as guests tried to process what they were seeing. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath and my father's muttered exclamation of shock. Marlene stood up from her chair at the head table, her face pale with confusion and growing horror. The video continued, showing the timeline of Marcus and Sarah's relationship through social media posts and photographs. Picture after picture showed them together over the past 3 years, celebrating anniversaries, taking romantic vacations, and sharing intimate moments that clearly indicated a serious, committed relationship. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, standing up and trying to move toward the DJ booth. "This is fake. Someone is trying to sabotage our wedding." But the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The next section of the video showed the text message conversations between Marcus and Sarah, including his promises to support her and their child, while maintaining his marriage to Marlene for business purposes. His own words, displayed clearly on every screen in the room, revealed his true intentions and his complete deception. The hospital security footage came next, showing Marcus with Sarah in the emergency room just 3 weeks ago. The audio was muffled, but the body language was unmistakable as Marcus comforted his pregnant girlfriend while she filled out medical paperwork. Marlene's composure completely shattered. She began screaming at the screens as if she could make the images disappear through sheer force of will. Turn it off, right now. This isn't real." The final portion of the video showed more recent evidence, including photos from just days ago of Marcus leaving Sarah's apartment building early in the morning. I had followed him on 3 separate occasions, documenting his pattern of spending nights with Sarah while maintaining the facade of devoted fiancé to Marlene. As the video ended, the reception hall erupted in chaos. Some guests were shouting questions, others were pulling out their phones to record the drama, and many were simply sitting in stunned silence. The carefully orchestrated celebration had transformed into a nightmare of public humiliation and family scandal. Marcus made a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "This is all fabricated," he shouted over the noise. "Beverly has been trying to destroy our relationship from the beginning because she's jealous of Marlene's happiness." But his denials rang hollow in the face of such comprehensive evidence. Several guests were already looking up Sarah's social media accounts on their phones, finding additional confirmation of the relationship that Marcus was trying to deny. At that moment, as if summoned by divine timing, Sarah herself appeared at the reception hall entrance. I had contacted her earlier that week, explaining that she deserved to know about Marcus's wedding plans, and inviting her to see for herself what kind of man she was involved with. Sarah was visibly pregnant and clearly distraught. She walked slowly into the reception hall, her eyes fixed on Marcus, with a mixture of hurt and determination. The sight of her physical presence made Marcus's denials completely impossible to maintain. "Marcus!" Sarah called out, her voice shaking with emotion. "I thought you said the wedding was called off. I thought you chose us." The reception hall fell into complete silence as everyone stared at this pregnant woman who represented the undeniable proof of Marcus's betrayal. Marlene looked back and forth between Marcus and Sarah, her wedding dress suddenly seeming like a costume for a play that had gone horribly wrong. Marcus's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, panic, anger, and finally resignation. There was no way to explain away Sarah's presence or deny the evidence that had just been presented to 150 wedding guests. "Marlene, I can explain," Marcus began, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he seemed to realize that no explanation could undo what had just been revealed. The immediate aftermath of my video presentation was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. The elegant reception hall, which had been filled with celebration and joy just minutes before, erupted into complete pandemonium. Guests were shouting questions, recording videos on their phones, and frantically discussing what they had just seen. Marlene stood frozen at the head table, her $20,000 wedding dress now seeming like an elaborate costume for a cruel joke. Her face cycled through expressions of shock, denial, rage, and devastation as she tried to process the reality of Marcus's betrayal. The perfect wedding day she had planned for months was crumbling around her in the most public way possible. Marcus attempted to approach Marlene, reaching out as if physical comfort could somehow undo the damage of his exposed lies. "Marlene, please let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. Sarah is just a friend who's been having problems with her boyfriend." "Friend." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. She was standing near the entrance to the reception hall, her pregnant belly making Marcus's casual dismissal seem even more absurd. "Marcus, I've been living with you for 6 months. That's our baby I'm carrying. How can you call me just a friend?" The revelation that Sarah had been living with Marcus sent another wave of shock through the crowd. Several guests gasped audibly, and I saw my parents' faces go completely white as they realized the full extent of the deception. Their perfect son-in-law wasn't just having an affair, he had been maintaining a completely separate household with another woman. Marlene finally found her voice, and when she spoke, it was with a fury I had never heard before. "You've been living with her while planning our wedding, while telling me you loved me and wanted to spend your life with me." "It's complicated," Marcus said weakly, his usual confidence completely gone. "There are business considerations, family obligations. You don't understand the pressure I've been under." "Business considerations?" Marlene's voice rose to a shriek that could probably be heard in the parking lot. "You married me for business. Our entire relationship has been fake." The wedding party, who had been sitting in stunned silence at the head table, began to react to the unfolding drama. Marlene's maid of honor attempted to comfort her, while Marcus's groomsmen looked like they wanted to disappear entirely. Several of them were backing away from Marcus, clearly not wanting to be associated with the scandal. My parents finally snapped out of their shock and rushed toward the head table. My mother immediately went to Marlene's side, while my father confronted Marcus with barely controlled rage. "It's my daughter," my father said, his voice shaking with anger. "You used our family. Everything you told us was a lie." Marcus tried to maintain some semblance of dignity, but his position was completely indefensible. "Mr. Thompson, I never meant for things to get this complicated. I do care about Marlene, but there were circumstances beyond my control." "Circumstances?" My mother interjected, her voice dripping with contempt. "You got another woman pregnant while engaged to our daughter. What circumstances could possibly justify that?" Sarah, who had been watching this family confrontation with growing distress, decided to add her own perspective to the situation. "He told me the engagement was fake," she called out, causing another wave of gasps from the guests. "He said it was just for business and that he would divorce her after a few years so we could be together openly." This revelation was the final straw for Marlene. She grabbed her bouquet from the head table and hurled it at Marcus with all the force she could muster. The carefully arranged flowers exploded against his chest, scattering white roses and baby's breath across the floor. "Get out!" Marlene screamed, her voice breaking with emotion. "Get out of here right now! I never want to see you again!" Marcus looked around the reception hall, seeing the faces of guests who now knew the truth about his character. His business associates, family members, and social connections had all witnessed his complete humiliation. The networking opportunities he had hoped to gain from marrying Marlene had evaporated, along with his reputation. "Fine," Marcus said, straightening his tuxedo jacket and trying to recover some dignity. "This was a mistake anyway. Marlene, you're too immature to understand complex adult relationships." This final insult was too much for my father, who had been restraining himself throughout the confrontation. He stepped forward as if he intended to physically confront Marcus, but the groom was already walking toward the exit with his groomsmen trailing reluctantly behind him as Marcus and his wedding party made their hasty retreat. The attention in the room shifted to me. I was still standing near the DJ booth holding the microphone and watching the chaos I had unleashed. Guests were staring at me with expressions ranging from admiration to horror, uncertain whether I was a hero or a villain in this unfolding drama. My parents' gaze found mine across the crowded reception hall, and I could see a mixture of rage and devastation in their eyes. They had spent months planning this wedding, invested their emotional energy and financial resources in creating the perfect celebration, and now it was completely destroyed. My mother was the first to confront me directly. She left Marlene's side and marched across the reception hall with determined fury, her elegant mother-of-the-bride dress billowing behind her like a war banner. "How could you do this?" she demanded when she reached me. "How could you destroy your sister's wedding? How could you humiliate our family in front of everyone we know?" "I tried to warn her privately," I replied, my voice steady despite the intensity of her anger. "I gave Marlene the evidence weeks ago, but she chose to ignore it. She accused me of lying and being jealous." "You should have come to us," my father said, joining my mother in their confrontation. "You should have handled this privately as a family matter." "Would you have believed me?" I asked, looking directly at both of them. "When has this family ever chosen my word over Marlene's? When have you ever protected me instead of protecting her?" The accuracy of my statement seemed to hit them both, but instead of acknowledging the truth, they doubled down on their anger. My mother raised her hand and slapped me across the face, the sound echoing through the reception hall and causing nearby guests to gasp in shock. "You are cruel and vindictive," my mother said, her voice shaking with rage. "You couldn't stand to see Marlene happy, so you destroyed her wedding day out of pure spite." I touched my cheek where her hand had struck me, feeling the sting of both the physical blow and the emotional rejection. Around us, wedding guests were watching this family confrontation with fascination and horror, many of them recording the drama on their phones. "I saved her from a marriage based on lies," I said quietly. "Marcus was never going to be faithful to her. He was using her for business connections while planning to support his real family with Sarah. Would you rather she discovered this after they were legally married?" But my parents weren't interested in logic or long-term considerations. They were focused on the immediate humiliation and the destruction of their carefully planned celebration. In their minds, I was the villain who had ruined everything, not the person who had exposed the truth about Marcus's deception. Marlene, who had been sobbing at the head table, suddenly stood up and walked toward our confrontation. Her wedding dress, which had looked so beautiful during the ceremony, was now wrinkled and stained with tears. Her carefully styled hair was disheveled and her makeup was streaked down her face. "I hate you," she said to me, her voice filled with venom. "I will never forgive you for this. You've destroyed the most important day of my life because you're bitter and alone." "I'm trying to protect you," I replied, though I knew my words would fall on deaf ears. "Marcus was never going to be the husband you deserved." "That was my choice to make," Marlene screamed, lunging toward me with her hands extended like claws. Several guests grabbed her arms, preventing her from physically attacking me, but her intent was clear. Security personnel from the country club finally arrived to restore order to the chaotic situation. They spoke quietly with my parents and the venue coordinator, trying to determine how to handle the unprecedented situation of a wedding reception that had devolved into a family brawl. The majority of the guests were already leaving, gathering their belongings, and heading toward the exits. Some looked sympathetic to my position, nodding approvingly as they passed me on their way out. Others seemed scandalized by my methods, whispering among themselves about the inappropriate way I had handled the situation. My parents issued their final ultimatum as the reception hall emptied around us. My father's voice was cold and final when he spoke. "You are no longer welcome in this family," he said, "unless you publicly apologize to your sister and take full responsibility for ruining her wedding. We never want to see you again." I looked around the nearly empty reception hall at the abandoned tables with their expensive centerpieces, at the wedding cake that would never be cut, at the dreams and plans that had been shattered by the truth. Then I looked at my parents and sister, who were waiting for me to beg for their forgiveness. "I won't apologize for telling the truth," I said simply. "I'm sorry Marlene was hurt, but I'm not sorry she learned about Marcus's deception before it was too late." Without another word, I handed the microphone back to Kevin, gathered my purse, and walked out of the reception hall. Behind me, I could hear my mother crying and my father making apologies to the remaining guests, but I didn't look back. The months following Marlene's wedding disaster brought changes to all of our lives that none of us could have anticipated. The immediate aftermath was brutal for everyone involved, but particularly for Marlene, who found herself dealing with public humiliation, social media scrutiny, and the complete collapse of her carefully constructed life plan. Within 24 hours of the wedding, videos of the confrontation had spread across social media platforms. Guests who had recorded the drama on their phones shared clips of my video presentation, Marlene's breakdown, and the family confrontation that followed. The hashtag #WeddingExpose began trending locally, and several gossip blogs picked up the story. Marlene's influencer career, which had been built on presenting a perfect lifestyle to her followers, suffered immediate and devastating consequences. Brands that had been paying her for sponsored content quickly distanced themselves from the scandal. Her follower count dropped by 60% within a week as people lost interest in her curated perfection now that her personal life had been revealed as a carefully constructed lie. The financial implications were equally severe. My parents had invested their savings and retirement funds in the wedding, expecting Marcus's wealthy family to reciprocate with business opportunities and social connections. Instead, they were left with enormous debt and no way to recover their losses. The venue required full payment, despite the early end to the reception vendors demanded compensation for their services, and the designer wedding dress had no resale value after the dramatic events. Marcus disappeared entirely from our social circle, apparently relocating to another state with Sarah to start fresh somewhere else. His real estate company, which had already been struggling financially, collapsed completely when his business associates learned about his deceptive practices. Several potential investors withdrew their support, citing concerns about Marcus's character and integrity. Sarah, meanwhile, gave birth to a healthy baby boy 3 months after the wedding. Through social media, I learned that she and Marcus had married in a small civil ceremony, though their relationship appeared strained. The stress of the public scandal and financial pressures had taken a toll on their romance, proving that relationships built on deception rarely survive, even when the truth finally comes out. As for me, the initial reaction from extended family and family friends was mixed. Some people praised my courage in exposing Marcus's lies, viewing me as a protective sister who had saved Marlene from a disastrous marriage. Others criticised my methods, arguing that I should have found a more private way to reveal the truth, rather than creating such a public spectacle. My parents made good on their threat to cut me out of the family. They changed their phone numbers, blocked me on social media, and informed relatives that I was no longer welcome at family gatherings. When my grandmother passed away 6 months later, I learned about her death through a mutual friend rather than from my own family. The isolation was painful initially, but it also provided clarity about the dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. Without the constant stress of trying to earn my parents' approval or compete with Marlene for their attention, I began to understand how toxic our relationships had become. I decided to make a fresh start, accepting a position as head nurse at a pediatric hospital in Denver, Colorado. The move put 1,500 miles between me and the family drama, allowing me to build a new life based on my own values and priorities, rather than the expectations of people who had never truly appreciated me. The new job was challenging but rewarding, working with children who faced serious medical conditions with remarkable courage and resilience. My colleagues respected my experience and expertise, creating a professional environment that was completely different from the family dynamics I had grown up with. 6 months into my new position, I met Glenn Patterson, a pediatrician who shared my passion for helping children and families during difficult times. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine compatibility rather than the superficial attractions that had characterized my previous relationships. Glenn was nothing like the men my family would have chosen for me. He wasn't wealthy or socially prominent, but he was kind, honest, and completely committed to his work and personal relationships. When I told him about the wedding incident and my estrangement from my family, he listened without judgment and supported my decision to prioritize truth over family harmony. My personal growth during this period was significant and sometimes surprising. Away from my family's constant criticism and comparison, I discovered strengths and interests that had been suppressed for years. I took art classes, joined a hiking group, and began volunteering with a literacy program for underprivileged children. The financial freedom of not supporting family members or trying to meet their expensive standards allowed me to save money and plan for my own future. I bought a small house with a garden, adopted a rescue dog named Charlie, and created a home environment that reflected my own preferences rather than anyone else's expectations. Therapy played a crucial role in my healing process. Working with a counselor helped me understand the patterns of favoritism and emotional manipulation that had shaped my childhood. I learned to recognize the difference between healthy family relationships and the toxic dynamics I had accepted as normal for 32 years. The most difficult part of my recovery was letting go of the hope that my family would eventually recognize their mistakes and reach out to rebuild our relationships. I had to accept that some people would never acknowledge their role in creating family dysfunction and that my emotional well-being couldn't depend on their approval or validation. 1 year after the wedding incident, I received an unexpected message through social media from one of Marlene's former bridesmaids. She explained that Marlene was struggling with depression and financial problems, living back home with our parents and unable to rebuild her career or social life. The message suggested that I should reach out to repair our relationship, implying that enough time had passed for everyone to move on from the wedding drama. I read the message several times, considering my response carefully. Part of me felt sympathy for Marlene's struggles and wondered if she had learned anything from the experience of Marcus's betrayal. But a larger part of me recognized that nothing in the message suggested genuine accountability or desire for real change. I crafted a polite but firm response explaining that I was open to rebuilding our relationship if Marlene was willing to acknowledge the years of favoritism and emotional abuse that had preceded the wedding incident. I made it clear that I wouldn't pretend the wedding was the beginning of our problems or accept responsibility for family dynamics that had been unhealthy for decades. The bridesmaid never responded to my message, and I never heard from Marlene directly. This confirmed my suspicion that they were looking for an easy reconciliation that would restore family harmony without requiring anyone to examine their own behavior or make meaningful changes. Instead of dwelling on my family's continued rejection, I focused on building relationships with people who valued honesty, kindness, and mutual respect. My chosen family included colleagues who became close friends, neighbours who looked out for each other, and Glenn's family, who welcomed me with genuine warmth and acceptance. 2 years after leaving home, Glenn proposed during a quiet weekend camping trip in the Rocky Mountains. His proposal was simple and heartfelt, focusing on our love and partnership rather than expensive rings or elaborate gestures. When I said yes, I felt a peace and happiness that I had never experienced in my original family relationships. 3 years have passed since that catastrophic wedding day, and my life has transformed in ways I never could have imagined while sitting at table 12 next to the kitchen service doors. The decision to expose Marcus's deception publicly was the catalyst for changes that extended far beyond that single evening, reshaping not only my relationships, but my entire understanding of what family should mean. Glenn and I were married last spring in a small ceremony in the mountains outside Denver. 25 people attended our wedding, close friends, supportive colleagues, and Glenn's family, who had embraced me as their own daughter from the moment we met. The ceremony cost less than the flowers at Marlene's reception, but it was filled with genuine love, laughter, and celebration of 2 people who truly knew and accepted each other. My wedding day was everything Marlene's had pretended to be: authentic, joyful, and surrounded by people who supported our relationship for the right reasons. There were no hidden agendas, no business arrangements disguised as romance, and no family members who attended out of obligation rather than love. The guest list was notably absent of my biological family, though I had sent them invitations as a final gesture of reconciliation. My parents returned their invitation unopened, and Marlene never responded at all. Their silence confirmed what I had already accepted. Some relationships are too damaged by years of toxicity to be repaired regardless of major life events. Glenn's family filled the emotional space that my biological family had never occupied properly. His parents treated me as a beloved daughter, celebrating my achievements and offering support during difficult times. His sister became the female family relationship I had always wanted, based on mutual respect and genuine friendship, rather than competition and comparison. My career has flourished in the supportive environment of the pediatric hospital. Last year, I was promoted to Director of Nursing for the entire children's wing, overseeing a team of 40 nurses and implementing new patient care protocols. The recognition and professional growth that eluded me for years in my hometown came naturally when I was finally in an environment that valued competence over politics. The children and families I work with have taught me profound lessons about resilience, courage, and the importance of truth in difficult situations. Many of these families face medical crises that make wedding drama seem trivial, yet they handle their challenges with grace and honesty that puts my own family's dysfunction into perspective. Through social media and mutual acquaintances, I occasionally receive updates about my biological family's situation. Marlene never recovered professionally from the wedding scandal and currently works part-time at a local retail store while living with our parents. Her social media presence, once carefully curated and profitable, now consists mainly of inspirational quotes and vague references to overcoming adversity. My parents' financial situation deteriorated significantly after the wedding expenses and Marcus's business failures. They had invested their retirement savings in Marcus's real estate projects, expecting substantial returns that never materialized. Now they work part-time jobs to supplement their reduced income, having learned too late that impressive facades don't guarantee financial security. Marcus and Sarah's marriage lasted 18 months before ending in a contentious divorce. Their relationship, built on the foundation of deceiving another woman, proved unable to withstand the pressures of parenthood, financial stress, and the social consequences of their actions. Sarah now raises their son as a single mother, while Marcus has disappeared entirely from our social circle. The most surprising development came 6 months ago when I received a message from my cousin Jennifer, who had attended Marlene's wedding and witnessed the entire confrontation. She explained that several family members had gradually come to understand my perspective on the wedding incident, recognizing that I had tried to protect Marlene from a harmful situation. Jennifer's message revealed that my actions had sparked conversations within the extended family about the favoritism and dysfunction that had characterized my parents' treatment of their daughters for years. Several relatives admitted they had noticed the disparities, but had remained silent to avoid family conflict. This validation from family members was gratifying, but also bittersweet. I appreciated their belated recognition of the family dynamics I had endured, but I also recognized that their silence during my childhood and young adulthood had contributed to my isolation and emotional pain. I responded to Jennifer's message with gratitude for her honesty and an explanation of my current life and happiness. I made it clear that while I harbored no ill will toward family members who were ready to acknowledge past mistakes, I also wasn't interested in returning to relationships that required me to minimize my own needs or accept unequal treatment. The therapy work I've continued in Denver has helped me understand that my decision to expose Marcus publicly wasn't primarily about revenge or spite, as my family claimed. It was about refusing to enable deception and demanding that important relationships be based on truth rather than comfortable lies. This principle has guided all of my subsequent relationships and decisions. I've learned to value people who communicate honestly, even when conversations are difficult, over those who maintain harmony through avoidance or manipulation. My marriage to Glenn is built on this foundation of authentic communication and mutual support. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I had chosen silence that evening, allowing Marlene's wedding to proceed without intervention. She would have married Marcus, discovered his deception eventually, and faced the additional pain of divorce custody battles and the legal complications of unwinding a fraudulent marriage. The children Marcus and Sarah would have had during his marriage to Marlene would have grown up in a household built on lies and resentment. Marlene herself would have wasted years of her life supporting a man who viewed her as a business arrangement rather than a beloved partner. My decision to reveal the truth was painful for everyone involved, but it prevented even greater pain that would have accumulated over years of deception. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their delusions even when they hate you for it. The most important lesson I've learned is that family isn't determined by blood relationships or shared genetics. Family consists of people who support your growth, celebrate your successes, and stand by you during difficult times. Family members communicate honestly, treat each other with respect, and prioritize each other's well-being over their own convenience. By this definition, Glenn and his family, my close friends in Denver, and my supportive colleagues are my true family. They provide the love, acceptance, and security that I spent 32 years seeking from people who were never capable of offering it. I no longer feel anger or bitterness toward my biological family. Their dysfunction was a product of their own limitations and unresolved issues, not a reflection of my worth or value as a person. Understanding this has freed me from the need for their approval or validation. My life now is characterized by peace, purpose, and authentic relationships. I wake up each morning in a home I've created with a partner who truly knows and loves me. I go to work knowing that my skills and dedication make a real difference in the lives of children and families facing medical challenges. The woman who sat silently at table 12 watching her family celebrate while feeling invisible and unvalued no longer exists. In her place is someone who speaks up, for truth demands respect in relationships, and refuses to accept treatment that diminishes her worth. If I could speak to other people who find themselves in similar situations, trapped in family dynamics that prioritize appearance over authenticity, I would tell them that walking away from toxic relationships isn't giving up on family, it's choosing to invest your emotional energy in relationships that have the potential for growth, honesty, and mutual support. Sometimes protecting yourself means disappointing people who never protected you. Sometimes being right doesn't make you popular, but being honest makes you free. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's delusion, even if they never thank you for it. I learned that my worth isn't determined by other people's recognition or approval. I learned that I deserve relationships based on truth, respect, and genuine affection. Most importantly, I learned that I have the strength to build the kind of life I want, regardless of the family I was born into. That knowledge has made all the difference. So, here's my question for all of you watching this story. Have you ever been in a situation where telling the truth meant losing relationships that were important to you? How did you decide what was more valuable? Maintaining harmony or standing up for what's right? Share your experiences in the comments below, because I know many of you have faced similar choices in your own families. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building authentic relationships. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people who claim to love them. Thank you for listening to my story and for understanding that sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Remember that you deserve relationships that celebrate who you are rather than constantly asking you to be someone else. Until next time, be kind to yourselves and never apologize for choosing truth over comfortable lies.